This is it. This time we got him for sure. It's a 100% guaranteed slam dunk. He's as good as gone. Millions of people watching, thousands taking to the streets to protest, tons of celebrities chiming in, House hearings. This is totally unstoppable. Trump's goose is cooked. He's destroyed. Totally finished. We got him this time for sure. Get ready to say, Das Vidania, Trumpo. There's only one problem. All of it, none of this matters at all. This is theater. This is a distraction, political kabuki, an entertaining performance merely to bide time. None of this is real. And I don't mean that in the insanely woke QAnon conspiratard way, like Trump is already dead and we're going to impeach a fake Trump body double who's been secretly serving as president. The trial is actually happening, and it's a real, alive Donald Trump. But impeachment itself isn't real. It is not going to happen, 100%. It's fakakta. Look, I don't like the guy any more than the next libtard, but impeaching him is a total dead end. It is, to quote a journalist who covered the Clinton impeachment, a political black hole. So in order to fully get across just how bad of an idea this is, to understand the attitudes behind it, and why folks are prioritizing such a doomed cause, not to mention just how unfathomably impossible getting rid of a president through impeachment actually is, we gotta go deep. So let's jump right into it. Section 1. What is impeachment and why is it never going to happen? First things first, impeachment is not removal from office. One more time, impeachment is not removal from office. That's not what it means. Nor is it being charged with a crime. Officially speaking, it is merely the adoption of charges or articles by the House, which then triggers a trial in the Senate. These are not legal charges. Impeachment is not a legal process. It is a political one. So, the TLDR, first, the Judiciary Committee recommends articles of impeachment. If that committee backs the articles, it goes to the House, which if the House votes on accordingly, it goes to the Senate. Senators then have a trial and decide whether to convict the president. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides over the trial, and then the senators have themselves vote. You need 67 senators to convict a supermajority, whereas you only need a simple majority in the House to impeach. Presidents can be impeached for abusing the power of the office, or really just about anything. And even judges, senators, you name it, any official can be impeached. One of the first problems that arise is that our founding fathers, in their infinite and divine wisdom, did not define impeachment very precisely. Impeachment, as Alexander Hamilton explained in Federalist 65, varies from civil or criminal courts in that it strictly involves the, quote, misconduct of public men, or in other words, from the abuse or violation of some public trust. The Constitution defines impeachable offenses as treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Treason and bribery are simple enough, but what exactly are high crimes and misdemeanors? No, like literally, I'm asking you, what are they? Nobody has a solid answer for it. It was never really properly defined. It's not explicitly laid out or defined anywhere. So the process itself is in some ways inherently faulty. Gerald Ford once said that an impeachable offense is whatever a majority of the House of Representatives considers to be at a given moment in history. No president ever in history has been removed from office by impeachment. Only 2 presidents, now 3, have ever formally been impeached, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, and both were acquitted in the Senate. Nixon knew he was going to get impeached and resigned to avoid that disgrace. So while technically he wasn't impeached, he's actually the most impeached. If we look into these past impeachments, we can understand even better just how insanely unlikely it would be that Trump be removed from office via impeachment, and also, in Bill Clinton's case, we can learn the political risks of even trying to do so. Andrew Johnson's entire presidency is case in point as to how monumentally shitty and hated a president can be while still not ultimately being impeached and removed by the Senate. Johnson bears the unfortunate ignominy of being both the first president to ever be impeached and, probably, the first president to be drunk at his own inauguration. It's hard to find a better example in history of an entire nation so united in hilariously dunking on someone. Zachariah Chandler, a Michigan Republican senator present for the inauguration, said, "The inauguration went off very well, except that the vice president-elect was too drunk to perform his duties and disgraced himself in the Senate by making a drunken, foolish speech." He continued, "I was never so mortified in my life. Had I been able to find a hole, I would have dropped through it out of sight." And it didn't end there. The New York World described it as the spewings of a drunken boar who defiled our chief council chamber. And the next day said, even Caligula's house was respectable. The Cincinnati Gazette referred to Johnson as a national insult and disgrace, and described his speech as idiotic babble. A London Times columnist said that, should anything happen to Lincoln, and Johnson were to become president, America would sink to a lower depth of degradation than was ever reached by any nation since the Roman emperor made his horse a consul. The New York Herald commented that it was disgraceful and noted that Republican senators hung their head in shame as Johnson spoke. The Confederate Richmond Sentinel joyously noted that the American people were already thoroughly disgusted with the low sot whom they have elected as their vice president. An anonymous Frenchman was quoted as well, saying Johnson launched into a detestable discourse pronounced in a still more detestable manner. And the actual speech itself, it was a total disaster. Please keep in mind that immediately after this, in a mere 700 words, Lincoln would deliver his second inaugural address, widely regarded as one of the greatest speeches in American political history, so timeless and eloquent that it is engraved for all time at the Lincoln Memorial. And also, please keep in mind that one short month after this, Lincoln would be dead and Johnson would be president. According to the Senate record of the event, Johnson rose unsteadily to harangue the distinguished crowd about his humble origins and his triumph over the rebel aristocracy. Johnson repeatedly emphasized his modest plebeian roots, and he turned to every single member of Lincoln's cabinet, reminding them that they owed their position to the people. I will say to you, Mr. Secretary Seward, and to you, Mr. Secretary Stanton, and to you, Mr. Secretary. At which point, he forgot the name of the Secretary of the Navy, stopped his speech, audibly whispered to the Secretary of State, John Forney, asked him who is the Secretary of the Navy, and then continued. Fucking unbelievable. What a fucking chud. Johnson wasn't done there, however. The very manner in which Johnson took the oath of office too was painfully cringy. Johnson slapped his hand on the Bible and proclaimed, sloppily, "I kiss this book in the face of my nation of the United States." According to Benjamin Butler, a Massachusetts senator who witnessed the oath, said Johnson slobbered the holy book with a drunken kiss. Lincoln could do nothing but avert his eyes from the humiliating spectacle. A close friend of the Lincolns noted that Lincoln, waiting for his turn to speak, dropped his head in the deepest humiliation. The Secretary of the Senate said, "I can never forget President Lincoln's face as he came into the Senate chamber while Johnson was delivering his incoherent harangue. He took his seat facing the brilliant and surprised audience and heard all that took place with unutterable sorrow." Johnson was an obstinate, curmudgeonly old racist who somehow managed to make the immense task of reuniting the country after the Civil War even harder and more miserable. He was only chosen as Lincoln's running mate due to being one of the only politicians from the South, Tennessee, who was also pro-union and anti-secession, ideal for Lincoln's message of national unity. Just 3 years after the Civil War, and only in power due to Lincoln's assassination, he somehow managed to unite anti-slavery radical Republicans and formerly pro-slavery Southern Democrats against him when they had just been at war with each other. In only 3 years, Johnson issued 21 vetoes, more than George Washington, James Madison, Andrew Jackson, and Abraham Lincoln combined. 71% of his vetoes were overridden by Congress, the highest for any president ever in history. He vetoed Kansas's admission into the Union. Can you believe this fucking guy? He vetoed them getting into the Union. He vetoed civil rights bills to protect the rights of recently freed slaves, supported black codes, pardoned high-ranking Confederate generals. Johnson's entire term was basically trying to bring about diet slavery and restore dignity to the South. And for the final coup de grace in Johnson's doomed swing around the circle speaking campaign, undertaken to support his preferred Democratic candidates in the forthcoming 1866 congressional midterm elections, disaster struck. On September 15, 1866, Johnson arrived by train to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to address 3,000 mostly supportive citizens. Precisely as Johnson came out to greet the crowd, a temporary platform for the audience spanning an old canal collapsed, sending about 400 people tumbling down a 20-foot drop. A journalist present described the chaotic scene thusly. Men and women were seen with helpless children in their arms, their clothes and faces blackened by the cold dirt against which they had fallen. And at exactly the height of people's distress, Johnson's presidential campaign train moved on. He literally left women with helpless children in their arms, dying in the dirt behind him to be punctual for a campaign stop. 13 people died. And to top it off, the Democratic Party Andrew Johnson was supporting lost in a landslide. Even with all this, it still took 3 tries to actually bring about impeachment, and the Congress literally had to draft a fake, illegal, and probably unconstitutional law just to put him into an impeachment trap. And even then, impeachment still failed in the Senate. He was acquitted by 1 vote, a senator from Kansas, fittingly. And keep in mind, there were 32 less senators than today. 3 separate impeachment attempts, drafting a law specifically for the sole purpose of impeaching him, leaving women and children dying in the dirt at one of his campaign stops, trying to bring back slavery after the Civil War, being a drunken and cringy old fool, a solid majority in the Senate held by the opposing party, and he still was not impeached and removed by the Senate. If this impeachment didn't succeed, how on earth will Trump's? The next crook president to be impeached was none other than Tricky Dick Nixon, a guy who fucked up so monumentally that to this day, in 2019, we still call scandals Gate, in reference to the epic fail that owned him and cost Nixon the presidency and his legacy. This is one of the big numbers that neatly encapsulates this whole entire ordeal. Trump's impeachment is by far the most hasty in the modern era, as both Clinton and Nixon were impeached well into their second terms. The House only moved to impeach Nixon more than 2 years after the initial Watergate break-in. The only other impeachment which compares in timescale was Johnson's, and as it was the first ever and a failed attempt at that, it's a terrible bar for comparison. In Nixon's case, articles of impeachment began to be drafted after 170 days. For Clinton, it was 64 days, and for Trump, they were drafted in a mere 35 days. The July 25th call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky occurred about 100 days before the formal inquiry began. The deposition, in which Clinton lied under oath, came more than 260 days before his formal impeachment began. Why was Nixon's impeachment so much more compelling than Trump's? The Mueller investigation lasted 674 days. The Watergate probe only lasted 155. Nixon literally recorded himself doing Watergate and giving the instructions, and he gave the tapes of that over to the Senate himself. The actual event in question included a scandalous and thuggish armed break-in with direct ties back to the president, an altogether much more spectacular and obviously criminal act than a phone call. Between January of 1973 and February of 1974, Nixon's approval rating plummeted from nearly 75% approval to a paltry 24%. The country's opinion on him was truly changed by the trial. Nixon fucked up so obviously, so irredeemably, and the break-in was so explicitly, provably ordered by him directly that even members of his own party overwhelmingly agreed to vote against him. And mind you, this is a Republican president who just won one of the biggest electoral landslides in American history. I could go on, but I'll come back to Nixon later. Now to the most relevant and most recent impeachment, Bill Clinton's. Bill Clinton was impeached for getting a BJ by a White House intern. I mean, there's other official reasons, but that's the real one, and that was the public perception.
There's another one right there, Bernard.
Mr. President, my name is Jason Smith, and I'm a senior.
Howdy do, Jason.
I was just wondering, do you feel you'll ultimately have to face Paula Jones in court to answer her charges of sexual harassment?
Okay, Jason, I appreciate your question, but we are limiting this evening's topics to current political issues, either at home or abroad.
Well, what about the broad at home that you cheated on?
So how did this impeachment attempt fare with the voters? It was a catastrophe. Not only did Republicans lose several seats, the first time since 1934 that the non-presidential party failed to gain congressional seats in a midterm election, but Newt Gingrich, who spearheaded the impeachment efforts, resigned in humiliation after details about his own extramarital affair emerged, with a congressional employee 23 years younger than him. The final nail in the coffin of that impeachment effort was when the guy that replaced Gingrich as speaker also resigned due to his own sex scandal breaking out. As the impeachment process began, Clinton's popularity with voters surged 10 points to 73%, the highest ever in Clinton's presidency, while simultaneously the number of those who viewed the Republican Party unfavorably jumped 10 points. An unmitigated and total disaster, and all for some dome. So out of the 3 tries thus far to remove a sitting president due to impeachment, literally all have failed, and at least one has backfired hugely on the impeachers. Okay, so what? That was then. This is now. Nothing that happened before 2016 is even real anyways. Besides, they didn't have J.K. Rowling and Stephen Colbert on their side. With them, impeachment is as good as guaranteed. Well, if history doesn't convince you, maybe hard numbers will. Starting with the most basic. 67. 67. That is how many senators it would take to vote to convict and remove Trump from office. Right now, there are 47 Democratic senators. So that means you need 20 Republicans to go against their party and constituents for impeachment to actually go anywhere in the Senate. Even generously assuming that Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, and Rob Portman of Ohio all break ranks and vote to remove Trump, those being the most likely to flip, if at all, and even assuming on top of that Cory Gardner of Colorado and Martha McSally of Arizona flip as well, 2 further Republicans who have 2020 races in red districts coming up. That only gives us 5 Republican senators willing to maybe on a good day vote to indict Trump. Where are the other 15 coming from? 1, 2, 3, 4? Maybe, I give you. But 15? Without a single Democrat breaking ranks? Keep in mind, not a single Republican voted to authorize the current House impeachment inquiry, and we had one guy switch parties to the Republicans because of this. Jeff Van Drew, who was a Democrat, switched to Republican. We've lost a seat to the Republicans in the House of Representatives because of this impeachment stuff already. And not only that, but Mitch McConnell and other Republicans want to go beyond the 51 vote threshold to simply dismiss impeachment and instead move to a vote acquitting the president completely, giving Trump a free political and PR win on a silver platter. Even forgetting the raw political calculus, which is ultimately all that matters, this is a terribly unpopular, losing issue that does nothing for Democrats who need to win in 2020 for the party to have any relevant political power whatsoever. More than 56% of independents have already made up their mind about impeachment and say there are no circumstances in which they change their mind. Another poll done in both November and October of 2019 showed no change whatsoever in the percentage of Americans saying Trump should be removed and impeached from office. A Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee survey found that voters perceived the number one priority of Democrats in Congress to be investigating Trump by a clean 54%. Voters' own priorities for Congress are healthcare costs, with 36% saying that was their top priority. By contrast, only 10% of voters said investigating Trump was their top priority. In another survey, a wide majority of Democratic, Independent, and Republican voters said taking action to lower prescription drug prices was their number one priority. Impeaching Trump was yet again dead last. These numbers simply are not budging. People's minds are made up on the issue. While voters overwhelmingly perceive impeachment to be congressional Democrats' sole objective, a major bill to lower prescription drug prices is actually moving through the House as we speak. The Elijah E. Cummings Lower Drug Costs Now Act. According to an analysis from the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, this bill will reduce federal spending on Medicare by $345 billion over 10 years and lower the cost of prescription drugs and all insulin effectively. Did you know about this bill? I didn't until I started doing research for this video. So even as a majority of voters surveyed say that their number one priority is taking action to lower prescription drug prices, and House Democrats are passing a well-reviewed bill to do exactly that, that is being overshadowed completely by the miasma of impeachment. Not to mention that the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates are having to completely change their campaigning plans in the critical last month before 2020 voting officially begins in February with the Iowa caucuses, just to partake in the Senate impeachment trial. The epic, dramatic, viral George Sondland trial was on the same night as a Democratic debate in Atlanta, completely overshadowing it. Looking at the 2020 Senate map brings up another quandary. In order to take the Senate in 2020, Democrats need to win in mostly Republican areas in Republican states. In a January 2019 poll of 1,989 registered voters, only 6% said Trump impeachment was their top priority, the last of all mentioned issues. Not only has Trump's approval rating not gone down during this time, it's actually gone up by some measures. Trump's overall job approval is remarkably steady, and it's actually up with both Republicans and Independents from the start of the year. The most notable decline in Trump's job approval was after the House Republican effort to repeal Obamacare was revealed. Most people who haven't made up their mind on the impeachment process don't care to follow it at all. In the ever-important swing states, the numbers are even more grim. In a recent survey of Wisconsin voters, 53% oppose impeaching Trump, compared to 40% who support. Even Nancy Pelosi herself has urged against impeachment, not to mention the recently deceased civil rights activist and Democratic representative Elijah Cummings. So considering no president ever has been removed from office via impeachment, considering it's insanely unpopular with the exact voting groups Democrats need to win with in 2020, considering it's literally politically impossible and can only end in a major victory for an acquittal of Trump.
We all know how it's going to end. There's no chance the president's going to be removed from office. My hope is that there won't be a single Republican who votes for either of these articles of impeachment.
I am trying to give a pretty clear signal. I have made up my mind. I'm not trying to pretend to be a fair juror here. This thing will come to the Senate, and it will die quickly, and I will do everything I can to make it die quickly.
Clearly nobody can support this, right? I mean, obviously an impossible, self-defeating, circular firing squad that only amounts to symbolic theater at best would be rationally opposed by just about everyone. I mean, right? Come on. Section 2. Jesus fuck. Well, if impeachment isn't possible, why are some people trying anyways? Who supports this and why? This story is not new. Since the moment Trump was elected, and hell, even before then, there has been talk of impeaching him and efforts to remove him from office via legal and procedural means. This is not the first time a certain choir has assured us that Trump is finished, destroyed, and that his removal is imminent and guaranteed. First it was Michael Flynn, then Stormy Daniels, then it was the tax returns, then it was the emoluments clause, then it was Russiagate, then it was Brett Kavanaugh, then it was James Comey, now it's Ukraine. There's always just one more thing that's definitely going to destroy and impeach Donald Trump. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. For this coterie of hashtag resistors, the uniquely American cult of celebrity worship is itself not the problem. No. We were just worshiping the wrong celebrity. It's not the reduction of politics to a form of easily consumed mass entertainment that is the problem. We were just on the wrong channel. For this clique, the American political, economic, and social system is never in need of structural change or fundamental reform. The current political paradigm we exist in is A-OK, peachy keen. We merely need one upstanding, messianic figure to come and rescue us from the bad guys. Politics is simply a story of uncomplicated heroes and villains. Nothing less, nothing more. Get rid of the orange goblin in the White House, and racism and inequality in America will evaporate overnight, forever. It was that easy all along. We're throwing you in the trash, right where you belong. Unfortunately, as much as I would like it to be the case, you're not just going to put together a political exodia on your first hand and destroy Trump's entire deck. It don't work that way. Actually, wait, there is one other thing. What if there was a sexy man? No, the sexiest man in the United States of America. An American hero. A combination of Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Iron Man all put together who could single-handedly rescue us from this political hell. Why bother putting time and effort into building a political movement when you can offload all that cared energy into simple hero worship? Surely this doe-eyed labradoodle sexpot Superman White Knight can, by himself, lock away Frugal Truth and throw away the key. Normalcy will be restored. Adam Schiff is, dare I say it, the Dumbledore to Trump's Voldemort. Maybe Dumbledore and Harry Potter combined. Have you ever seen a more handsome man, a more beautiful man in all your life? Adam Schiff is the latest recipient of the sycophantic fawning of the #resist crew. Never mind that this hero has close ties to weapon manufacturing companies like Raytheon, which hosted a $2,500 a head fundraiser for Schiff, at which Beyonce performed. Never mind that he voted against removing U.S. troops from Afghanistan, voted in favor of the Iraq War, is an unrepentant shill for the Pentagon, or that he voted for U.S. taxpayer-funded support of Saudi Arabia's disastrous war in Yemen, in which more than 100,000 civilians, most of whom are children, have been killed or starved to death. He's a hero of the #resistance. He's a national hero, an international hero, a universal hero. He's the sexiest man in the United States of America. Ever notice that you never see Adam Schiff and Superman in the same room? Just saying, oh, he's our liberal messiah. Sound familiar? Indeed, it must, as there was another, before Schiff, who received even more fawning, slobbering, unwanted worship than he. One who was supposed to banish and seal away the hated orange one for all eternity. It may have ended in an operatic, anticlimactic, pathetic anticlimax, but nevertheless, we're going there. But I hear some of you ask, who is this chivalrous white knight coming to rescue America from the big bad Russians? Who is this handsome, morally perfect, infallibly virtuous, angelic savior from above, generously volunteering his time to fight and indict bad dudes? Why, it would be none other than, Robert Mueller.
サイドチェスト一部の無駄もない鍛え上げられた筋肉その美しさはまるでダイヤモンド感服すぎて言っちゃいそう
How on earth did a 74-year-old Republican former FBI director end up as the #resist messiah? And certainly, I must be exaggerating, right? How intense can this dude's fan club really be? You have no fucking earthly idea. I swear to God. Of all the scandals, crimes, corruption, criminality, vice, villainy, wickedness, and depravity in this video, what I'm about to discuss and share with you is the only thing that truly nauseates and disturbs me to my core. Warning, this is not for sensitive viewers. If you want to express your blind faith and devoutness to St. Mueller, there is no shortage of options. What about a St. Robert Mueller prayer candle, literally equating a 74-year-old former FBI director with divinity and statehood? Only $12.49. Don't like that style? Don't worry. There's a few varieties. How about this one? Only a mere $31. Or this fabulous patron saint of indictments prayer candle, only $15. Guaranteed to indict the orange man, who is bad, if you pray to it faithfully enough. How about a Robert Mueller button? A Robert Mueller pennant? A Robert Mueller action figure? Perhaps you prefer a Robert Mueller ugly Christmas sweater? Or a black flag modeled Mueller time t-shirt? Because, to quote the vendor, what's more punk than a former FBI director taking down the worst president ever? A Mueller time pint glass, mayhaps. A Mueller time pin, where the salesman proudly states on the Mueller investigation, it's the best entertainment tax dollars can buy. Wouldn't you like a stylish Mueller knows everything baseball cap? It's a real hit with the ladies. Maybe a collector's edition, it's Mueller time TM bobblehead doll. Maybe a super stylish and celebrity endorsed God Protect Robert Mueller sweater, as worn by Spike Lee. Maybe a Condé Nast Mueller's got this baby onesie. It's never too early to get your baby Muellering. God bless Robert Mueller cross stitch. How about a comical indictments are coming t-shirt? Get it? Just like the Games of Thrones. How about a Mueller earrings? All Mueller everything, all the time. What's your favorite movie? There's a Mueller for that. Judge Dredd, Jaws, Star Wars. Replace every main character in every movie ever with Robert Mueller. How about a P-tape candle and Mueller prayer candle in one? Now that the P-tape is a proven fake, what could possibly drive someone to not only make and sell this, but create a Kickstarter soliciting money for its production, let alone to fund a fucking P-tape prayer candle on Kickstarter? Holy fuck. Vogue proudly proclaimed Robert Mueller as America's new crush, telling Chris Hemsworth and Idris Elba to step aside. How could they possibly hold a candle to this hunk? A former colleague of Mueller's at the FBI publicly compared him to fictional superhero Batman. Rachel Dodes of Vanity Fair wrote an especially cringe-inducing piece entitled, "Indict Me, How Mueller Won the Hearts of America." Allow me to read you some highlights from this literary masterpiece. But before doing so, let me remind you that a real adult human being was paid real American dollars to write these words in a mainstream and well-known magazine, IRL. Robert Mueller, may I call you Swan? To me, you are a swan, majestically gliding through a sea of documents, neck outstretched as your legs paddle wildly underwater, unseen and unheard. Oh, you're beautiful. I find myself increasingly enchanted by your slightly bulbous nose, your caterpillar eyebrows, your perfectly parted silver hair. Oh. Robert S. Mueller III, you are the epitome of BDE, but also subtlety, patience, and righteousness. Chelsea Handler went on national daytime TV and told people to riotous laughter and applause that she was sexually attracted to Robert Mueller.
You were looking forward to the Mueller report, and now what's...
I'm sexually attracted to Robert Mueller, and I'll explain why. I have a daddy issue because I talk about that in my book. I've been attracted to older men for quite some time. The problem is as I get older, then they get really old. Yep. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of condense that margin.
Think this is all a bit much? This isn't even the tip of the iceberg. How about a 1 hour and 14-minute long live theatrical performance of the Mueller report entitled The Investigation, A Search for the Truth in 10 Acts, featuring such washed up stars as John Lithgow, Justin Long, Alyssa Milano, and Zachary Quinto. This play has since been streamed over 1 million times. How about fucking Robert Mueller tattoos? Yeah, Mueller tattoo. You're not going to regret that anytime soon.
Before even talking about Mueller, let's just break it down. You don't regret tattoos, right? Anybody who regrets a tattoo is an asshole, right?
When the first argument in the video explaining why you don't regret your tattoo is nobody ever really regrets a tattoo. Oh my god, that's how you know you fucked up. That's how you know you fucked up.
Always cover it up, get it removed, whatever. Some of you know me pretty well. Have you ever seen me without a shirt on? It doesn't really happen, okay? So, regretting tattoos is just something that I don't understand that. There it is. I can point that way, right? So, it's a nice piece of artwork. Some people think it looks like George Soros. Some people think it looks like John Goodman. So you guys, if anything, I feel like you've been found to be ridiculous. Not me. I got a stupid tattoo as a fucking joke. To bust people's balls and get them fired up. Same as Roger Stone did. He got that tattoo of Nixon to give a big fuck you to liberals. How many times have you heard conservatives say, I just like to own the libs? Who is it?
I'm owning you with my terrible tattoo. Aren't you so owned?
You guys don't understand humor in the way that I do, okay? So maybe I'm crazy and you're not, but I got this tattoo for the same reason that Roger Stone got the Nixon tattoo.
I don't regret this tattoo, you just don't get it. That's the problem. This trial, which ultimately amounted to very little despite bringing about a few prominent arrests, has kicked off an entire genre of Mueller-related art output. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert deserves special attention here for miraculously making a single bad Trump impression last for over 3 years of nightly episodes. Puts the fucking Hanukkah miracle to shame. And yet, even more soul-crushingly, Colbert's identical routines shouting, "Trump impeach!" every single night for 3 years have made him the #1 most watched late-night host in the ratings, especially with adults 18 to 49, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Better yet, we have SNL, whose writers have basically gone on vacation as they've mindlessly recycled the same Mueller, De Niro, Baldwin, Trump jokes over and over and over and over. I mean, look at these two skits right here. De Niro doesn't even say anything at all, and he literally does the same fucking joke in both skits. Who the fuck pays you people? SNL not your thing? What about a 7-minute long sketch about Robert Mueller stalking and hunting Trump as Mueller Man? Get it? Like Slender Man, but with Robert Mueller instead. Mueller. The lazy, uninspired writers of The Late Late Show with James Corden are especially indictable, taking normie-ass pop songs and turning them into unbearable Muellerified music video covers like It Wasn't Me or Robert Mueller's indictment song.
I just want to ask you some questions about Russia's influence on the 2016 election.
Well, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say it wasn't me.
All right.
Ugh, there's entire fucking YouTube channels consisting of nothing but Mueller and Trump-based covers of popular music.
It's the time of the treason. Are those Trump fans high?
Oh, impeach mode, impeach mode. Oh, impeach mode. I'm Mr. Old Mueller. How about a Mueller Christmas Carol? How about 3 different types? As surely as I'm sitting here making this video, I swear to you, there are nights where I lay awake unable to sleep due to the sheer Lovecraftian horror and nausea induced by a Mueller Christmas as sung by the Resist Choir.
We wish you a Mueller Christmas. We wish you a Mueller Christmas. We wish you a Mueller Christmas.
Don't let your kids watch it! This is madness. This is derangement. Let's take a look at this particularly diluted segment from The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, a Christmas cartoon where Robert Mueller meets Santa and saves Christmas from Drumpf. This is real. That's a real sentence that I just said. That's real words about a real thing that actually exists, and I'm going to show it to you now. God forgive me.
Santa and Robert Mueller, he is real.
Let's give them their Christmas presents, Kringle.
Hey, Donnie! Sorry about your wall, but we did get you some matching Christmas pajamas.
Oh, I sure hope you like orange, Drumpfy, because that's what they wear in jail, where Mueller is putting you any day now, any day now. This cartoon sound familiar? Indeed, it must, considering The Late Show's Christmas cartoon this year was a nearly identical, almost shot-for-shot, gag-for-gag version of this Mueller cartoon, but with Adam Schiff and impeachment instead of Robert Mueller and the Mueller report. If that doesn't prove my point, nothing does. Every single time we are told the same stupid story, this is a real, honest shot of getting Trump out of office. Maybe, just maybe, if we buy enough prayer candles, watch enough Late Show skits, create enough anti-Trump related media, spoofs, and satires, if we pwn him hard enough, this nightmare will end and we can go back to the days of the comforting imperialist war criminal known as Obama. When the Mueller report inevitably failed, as will the current Schiff-Ukraine impeachment, there will always be something else that the hashtag resist crew can rally around with exactly the same gusto. There will always be another scandalous revelation, another viral congressional testimony or Mayor Pete dance. There will always be another epic own on Trump, another sizzling headline, scintillating leak, or another middling bureaucrat to put on an insane pedestal. None of that shit matters whatsoever. This isn't what wins elections, changes minds, builds political movements, or protects vulnerable people from further exploitation. As Kurt Vonnegut so eloquently put it, during the Vietnam War, every respectable artist in this country was against the war. It was like a laser beam. We were all aimed in the same direction. Power of this weapon turns out to be that of a custard pie dropped from a stepladder 6 feet high. It's unlikely the current Schiff or Ukraine saga of impeachment will reach the same hype levels of the Mueller report, but that's precisely why I focus on the extremes of that deranged cult so much. No Rust Belt purple state voter is going to hear your fucking anti-Drumpf cover of Hotel California and become a socialist then and there on the spot. Did Christine Blasey Ford's testimony, as courageous, impactful, and necessary as it was, actually sway any Republican votes in the Kavanaugh confirmation? No. He was confirmed and made a sitting Supreme Court justice with exactly the same votes as if Christine Blasey Ford's testimony never happened at all. These symbolic acts and viral moments make for some gripping TV, and we have gotten some very stirring speeches out of it. But right now, we need more than spectacle. So to finally put the nail in the fucking coffin on both this impeachment, Russiagate, Mueller, the whole fucking shebang. Are you ready for the funniest part? Are you ready? Are you absolutely fucking sure? Here, I'll let Stone Cold Fox and legal ubermensch Robert Farkin Mueller himself explain it to you. Get your Virginias ready, ladies.
The OLC opinion, Office of Legal Counsel, indicates that we cannot indict a sitting president.
Did you get that? Here, let me put this on screen for you. The Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel, whose rulings Mueller has to abide by, deems indicting a sitting president to be unconstitutional. Mueller could never even fucking indict Trump in the first place. It wasn't even legally possible. This is from a ruling going back to 1973, hardly breaking news. So all of this sycophancy, all of this adoration, all of this smugly acting like any day now Mueller will bust into the Oval Office and arrest Donald Trump. All of this venerating Robert Mueller like a literal divine savior was for absolutely fucking nothing in the end. Here's how the headlines ran at the end of it all.
Oh, here we go. Colluded with Russia. Let's take that one off.
So Trump was right about no collusion. Okay, so there was no collusion. Big deal. Certainly we can nail Drumpfo on obstruction of justice, right? Nope. Chapter 73 of the U.S. Code, Title 18, clearly states that the statute of limitations on federal obstruction of justice charges is 5 years. 5 years. So either way, if Trump gets reelected in 2020, there's no way to charge him with obstruction of justice either. Also, just to further destroy this insane Mueller-Ukraine stuff, collusion isn't even a crime. All this talk of Russian collusion was nonsense from the start. Even if he did collude with Russia, that isn't even illegal. And even if it was, Mueller could never have indicted him for it. Wow, what a hero. Alright, so Mueller isn't our savior, and he might be an imperfect, mortal, fallible man, just like anyone else, but my prayer candles. How can he be a human like me when he's Paul Bunyan and Bigfoot combined? If he's not our savior, then who is he? So before being canonized as a saint via #resist P-tape prayer candles, Mueller had a long and not so illustrious career as FBI director. Here's some of the lowlights of that long stint at the FBI. 1. Help promote the lie about Iraq having WMDs in the build-up to the Iraqi war.
Baghdad has failed to disarm its weapons of mass destruction.
2. Covered up Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11. 3. Despite receiving multiple warnings about 9/11, missed them all and claimed there were no warnings. 4. Was a steadfast advocate of the Patriot Act, which vastly expanded the US government's abilities to spy on its citizens, and also lied about the numerous times the FBI acted inappropriately and spied on US citizens illegally. Oh, he's so dreamy. Take my civil liberties away harder, Daddy. Does anyone truly believe that simply getting rid of Trump is the one thing that would render America into an egalitarian utopia overnight? The purpose of all this, all these courtroom theatrics, is not to actually mount an effective political opposition to Trumpian nationalism in America and present a superior alternative vision. It is to entertain. Journalists and other bigwigs openly discuss it in these terms, describing the allegedly very serious TM courtroom proceedings with such appalling language as "the book was better than the movie," or disappointingly musing that the most recent episode wasn't as fun as they had hoped. Gosh, I sure hope Netflix renews them for another season. Pretending Trump is some unique aberration of America's so-called egalitarian values is a terrible mistake. It's a childish, naive way to avoid having to accept the truth of America as a deeply flawed and cruelly racist country that has done some truly terrible things throughout the course of its very brief history.
You know, America's not unique in its sins as a country. We're not unique in our evils, to be honest with you. I think where we may be singular is our refusal to acknowledge them. And the legends and myths we tell about our inherent, goodness to hide and cover and conceal so that we can maintain a kind of willful ignorance that protects our innocence. See, the thing is that when the Tea Party was happening, we were saying, pundits, oh, it's just about economic populism. It's not about race. When people knew, social scientists were already writing that what was driving the Tea Party were anxieties about demographic shifts, that the country was changing, that they were seeing these racially ambiguous babies on Cheerios commercials, that the country wasn't quite feeling like it was a white nation anymore. And people were screaming from the top of their lungs, yo, this is not just simply economic populism. This is the ugly underbelly of the country. It's easy for us to place it all on Donald Trump's shoulders. It's easy for us to place Pittsburgh on his shoulders. It's easy for me to place Charlottesville on his shoulders. It's easy for us to place El Paso on his shoulders. This is us. And if we're gonna get past this, we can't blame it on him. He's a manifestation of the ugliness that's in us.
But what about accountability? The moral standing of the United States is at stake. It's a crime to alter official government weather forecasts. Why not impeach Trump for his Sharpied hurricane map? Accountability matters, Obama broke campaign finance law in 2008. Why not impeach him for that? Accountability matters, Towards the end of the second Bush administration, there was all this talk of someone making a citizen's arrest on Bush and Cheney and bringing them to the ICC for a trial. Every time they would travel abroad, people would assure us that it's simply inevitable that they'll be arrested for their crimes and tried at The Hague. Spoiler alert, they weren't. It was mere fantasy all along, wishful thinking. Of course, that was before Obama himself became an arguably even worse war criminal than W, and the anti-war left died, lest it be forced to criticize their messianic savior and do any political reflection whatsoever. Some crimes we care enough about to protest and prosecute. Others we are all too happy to ignore. Choosing this particular crime to make a grandiose stand about the accountability of the president is the height of self-delusion, misguidedness, and naivete. Saying that this particular action of this particular president is where we will draw the line, a temporary hold on aid to the Ukraine, shows me beyond any shadow of a doubt that hundreds of millions of Americans are fundamentally uninformed about the sheer extent hint of what sort of illegal, evil things the presidents can do and continue to do, free of any form of repercussions, legal, social, political, or otherwise. In America, the truly bad crimes, the really meaningfully evil, blatantly unconstitutional, unethical shit is the sort of stuff that never gets you held accountable. And that only becomes more and more true the higher up on the political totem pole you are. That we would choose this crime, of all the crimes of the past U.S. presidents, recent, past, living, deceased, whatever, to actually go forward with on impeachment truly sickens me. That is where you lose me. And please allow me to illustrate precisely why. I'd like to point you to the example of one Dr. Henry Kissinger.
Henry Kissinger! War crime attack!
We should bomb Cambodia and Laos without telling Congress.
A man who by his own admission has broken the law willfully, egregiously, in the open, throughout multiple administrations. He is famously quoted as saying, "The illegal we do immediately. The unconstitutional takes a little longer." Even cartoon shows for children openly joke about the fact that this man engineered a blatantly illegal bombing campaign which unnecessarily killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people, American soldiers and Cambodian civilians alike. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is a verifiable fact that this man has done this, and countless other illegal, despicable things. And yet the closest I can find to him having been held accountable is there's this one Freakazoid episode where Tim Curry kidnaps him and tries to turn him into a half-human, half-orangutan hybrid. That's pretty much it.
And now, here to discuss the Loeb's moral quandary is Dr. Henry Kissinger.
But in my opinion, I don't think that you could not love, especially
Now, why on earth is such a blatant war criminal allowed to walk around as not only a free man, but a respected elder statesman? Where is the urging for accountability of his crimes? Because he has cleverly committed his crimes under both Republican and Democratic presidents alike, there are no political points to be scored in his prosecution. Hillary Clinton openly praised him during her failed 2016 presidential campaign. She sang happy birthday to him at his 90th birthday, and Obama honored him at the White House, giving him a medal. Oh, and this decrepit ghoul of a crook is still alive today and advising the Trump administration. And I'm sure some of you will say, oh, but who cares? That was 1 trillion years ago. It's old news. None of that shit matters now. Oh, really? It doesn't matter. It's ancient history, right? Dead and buried, yeah? Yeah, buried like the 80 million unexploded U.S. bombs still buried in Laos. And they still continue to kill, maim, and destroy innocent lives 50 years later. As a matter of fact, casualties from UXO, unexploded ordnance, were up 40% in 2019. At the current rate of removal, Laos can hope to be free of unexploded bombs in about, 200 years or so. That'll go by in the blink of an eye. Thanks to the sage wisdom of the ultimate political realist, Dr. Henry Kissinger, awarded medals by the Obama administration and treated to a sycophantic rendition of Happy Birthday by his protege, Hillary Clinton, Cambodia has the highest ratio of amputees per capita in the world. From 1964 to 1973, as part of the secret war operation conducted during the Vietnam War, the U.S. military dropped 260 million cluster bombs, about 2.5 million tons of munitions on Laos over the course of 580,000 bombing missions. This is equivalent to a plane load of bombs being unloaded every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 years. That's nearly 7 bombs for every man, woman, and child living in Laos. It's almost a ton of bombs for each of Laos's then 2 million residents. It is more than all the bombs dropped on Europe throughout World War II, leaving Laos, a country approximately the size of Utah, with the unfortunate distinction of being the most heavily bombed country in history. And Kissinger personally approved each of the 3,875 Cambodia bombing raids in 1969 and 1970. And not only did he approve of them, he was positively gleeful at the prospect. Allegedly, he expressed enthusiasm at the size of the bomb craters. For Kissinger, this massive carpet bombing campaign, which killed about 275,000 people, was a joyous occasion. Nixon's chief of staff noted that Kissinger arrived the next day, beaming with happiness at the official reports of the carnage. A journalist observed that when the military men presented a bombing list, Kissinger would redesign the missions, changing the times, the locations, all that kind of stuff of the bombing runs. The journalist also noted that Kissinger seemed to particularly enjoy playing the bombardier. And indeed, but who would mind if worthless Cambodian lives be discarded to become the personal playthings of Henry Kissinger? A true patriot through and through he is. Oh, and let's not forget that the worst bombing started in February 1973, a month after Washington, Hanoi, and Saigon signed the Paris Peace Accords. In 1972, the U.S. dropped, in total, 53,000 tons of bombs on Cambodia. Between February 8th and August 15th, 1973, that number increased nearly 5-fold and targeted not just enemy sanctuaries, raised in the country's east, but the whole country. A special furnace was set up only to burn evidence of this bombing campaign, particularly Kissinger's involvement. People worked 12 hours a day to burn all the evidence. Oh, but don't worry, his accomplishments are not relegated to the mere past. Not only is he still alive, he's still working in government. He's met with President Trump multiple times, who is seeking his endless wisdom on foreign policy matters. Drain the swamp, right guys? Clinton praises him, Obama awards him, Trump employs him, and most key of all, nobody prosecutes him. This is why this man and his legacy of turning everything he touches to death and destruction is so important to contrast against the current farce of impeachment. A temporary fucking hold on aid to the Ukraine, asking someone to maybe do an investigation on Hunter Biden, someone who isn't even an American political figure, but rather the son of one? This is what I'm supposed to be up in arms about? Rending my clothes in mourning due to the lack of accountability over? While war criminals walk free and continue to serve at the highest levels of government? While a million more obviously egregiously illegal crimes are openly committed by the president without so much as an SNL skit addressing them. This is where we make our great, noble, moral stand for accountability. It is a fucking joke. Oh, and don't worry, Kissinger's resume doesn't end at Cambodia and Laos. In fact, it's just the beginning. Here's some of the other horrible, terrible, illegal, murderous things Kissinger has done under both Democratic and Republican presidents, for which he has not only never been punished, but in fact has been lauded, celebrated, and lavished with heaps of respect, praise, and attention by both sides of the political aisle. Please compare and contrast the following with Trump's egregious sin, a temporary hold on aid to the Ukraine. Kissinger supported the military dictator Yahya Khan of Pakistan as he committed a genocide in Bangladesh, fully aware of the scale of his actions. Famously, Archer Blood, a diplomat serving at the American Consul General in Dhaka, Bangladesh, sent a strongly worded telegram, later to be known as the Blood Telegram, specifically saying the US government was not doing enough to prevent its Pakistani client state from committing atrocities, and he literally specifically used the word genocide. Alarmed by these distressing developments, Kissinger and Nixon acted quickly, not to restrict Yahya Khan's genocide in progress, no, of course not that, but they instead recalled Archer Blood from his diplomatic post for daring to criticize their support of a genocide. And they also illegally continued to funnel arms to Khan despite a formal aid cutoff via third parties like Jordan and Turkey, which is completely, blatantly illegal. This 9-month-long genocide would result in the deaths of around 3 million people and also comprised a campaign of mass rape that claimed as many as 400,000 women's lives. Oh, but Kissinger wasn't done with Bangladesh just yet. No. Kissinger's usage of the food weapon, or food aid as political leverage, slashed food aid for Bangladesh in 1974 to a mere $41 million, reserving the rest to prop up failing US-backed regimes in South Vietnam and Cambodia. This may have caused, but at bare minimum exacerbated, the 1974 Bangladesh famine. Dan Ellerman, a serving member of the National Security Council at the time, echoed Kissinger's realpolitik, saying, "To give food to countries just because people are starving is a pretty weak reason." Indonesia's invasion and occupation of East Timor, which Kissinger greenlighted, resulted in the deaths of approximately 500,000 people. It is described by the CIA itself as, quote, one of the worst mass murders of the 20th century, along with the Soviet purges of the 1930s, the Nazi mass murders during the Second World War, and the Maoist bloodbath of the early 1950s. Not only was this invasion and massacre fully known about by the US and Kissinger, but diplomatic cables from the time state that militias which carried out the genocide were, quote, totally US supported, trained by the US, and nearly all the military equipment used in the slaughter was provided by the US. Kissinger and President Gerald Ford met President Suharto the day before the genocide commenced, and yet more diplomatic documents reveal the US ambassador to Indonesia, David Newsom, requested that, quote, Indonesia take no military action until well after the president's departure from Jakarta. Wouldn't want something as minor as a genocide to make the president look bad, now would we? I mean, this list could go on forever, including Kissinger's support for the violent overthrow of democratically elected socialist president of Chile, Salvador Allende, and replacing him with convicted war criminal and dictator Augusto Pinochet. Or how Kissinger knew of plans to overthrow Archbishop Makarios in Cyprus and did nothing, leading to Greece being ruled by a military junta, and as of 2020, northern Cyprus still remains occupied by the Turkish army, despite the constitution and presidency having been restored. This guy Kissinger is still fucking alive, still advising presidents, and still being treated as a respected member of American political life. There is no world in which a temporary hold on aid to the Ukraine in exchange for investigating political opponent outweighs the absolute fucking mountain of corpses Kissinger is almost solely responsible for. At least if accountability is truly the goal and not partisan political theater. So which laws are really illegal for the president and which ones are only kinda sorta illegal? Which ones do we care enough about to protest? And what does that say about us? Indeed, the right to bomb neutral countries the United States isn't at war with in the name of national security is now unquestionably accepted across the foreign policy spectrum. We've even invented a whole category and name to describe the laws that American presidents can break at will but are never punished for. We call them war crimes. We have gone nose blind to the stench of our own empire. To put it bluntly, a phone call with Ukraine, quid pro quo, it's not exactly the juiciest fucking scandal I ever heard in my life. You know what might be a bit spicier? How about, I don't know, illegally declaring war on an entire country and slaughtering millions of people while squandering an entire generation's future on Raytheon stock? Maybe that's a little more scintillating? The terrifying and hilarious thing is that Nancy Pelosi was actually recently asked this exact same question in an interview, and her answer is as gobsmacking as it is telling.
You resisted calls for the impeachment of President Bush in 2006. Why did you oppose impeachment in the past?
There was overwhelming call for me to impeach President Bush on the strength of the war in Iraq, which I vehemently opposed. I was the ranking member on the Intelligence Committee, so I knew there were no nuclear weapons in Iraq. It just wasn't there. They had to show us, they had to show the Gang of Four all the intelligence they had. The intelligence did not show that was the case. So I knew it was a misrepresentation to the public. But having said that, not a ground impeachment. They won the election. I mean, it's appalling what they did. But they had impeached Bill Clinton for personal indiscretion and misrepresenting about it. Now they want me to do George. I just didn't want it to be a way of life in our country.
Fucking chilling. Illegally waging war on an entire country, slaughtering innocent people in their millions? A-okay. Everything's above board, break a leg. A temporary hold on aid to the Ukraine?
Stop him! Put him in jail! Call police on him!
That's where I draw the line. Lying to the American people about the war in Afghanistan for 17 years? Boring. What a snooze fest. I'll take a scintillating testimony from that dreamboat sexpot Schiff over that any day. What about the blatantly illegal torture facility in Cuba that Obama promised to close, that same illegal torture facility that Trump continues to operate, which cost taxpayers $150 million a year to continue to operate? Our founding fathers were unambiguously opposed to torture, both in the Constitution and in their own personal writings. Why is that not impeach-worthy? Drawing the line here, choosing this particular crime to make a point about presidential accountability is such a massive red herring and the creme de la creme of hypocrisy that I simply had to make this video. Let's look at some of the most egregious actual crimes of Trump and ask ourselves why we care so little about accountability for these crimes, but so much about this Ukraine scandal. 2018 was the highest level for civilian deaths in Afghanistan since the war began. And 2018 was also the highest number of bombs dropped by the U.S. coalition on Afghanistan since the war began. U.S. forces and their Afghan allies have killed more civilians in 2019 than the Taliban themselves have. The United Nations report said 83% of casualties from airstrikes were attributed to international military forces. And since the only member of the international coalition in Afghanistan that carries out airstrikes is the United States, well, you can do the math on that one. Trump has continued and expanded on Obama's support of Saudi Arabia's disastrous war in Yemen in alarming and illegal ways. Despite Trump's criticism of Hillary Clinton's support for and from Saudi Arabia, Trump has managed to outdo even her in this fawning, bootlicking subservience to Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia was Trump's first trip as president, despite high-ranking members of the Saudi royal family extending financial support to the 9/11 terrorists, and Saudi Arabia's continued support for Wahhabi-style jihadist terrorism worldwide. Trump wasted no time in lavishing the Saudis with tons of weapons for their illegal war in Yemen and conveniently excluded them from his list of banned Muslim countries, despite literally all of the 9/11 hijackers coming from Saudi Arabia. Trump repeatedly bragged about the huge weapons deal he made with Saudi Arabia, but he happened to leave out a few key facts, such as the arms that Trump has sold to Saudi Arabia have since been directly passed on to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The Saudi coalition in Yemen literally is just giving bags of money to Al-Qaeda fighters to retreat with looted weapons, and hundreds of Al-Qaeda fighters are joining the Saudi coalition that Trump is supporting directly. Trump's administration conveniently urging that lawsuits against the Saudi royal family for their culpability in the 9/11 attacks be dropped, the Trump administration turning the other way and ignoring that Saudi Arabia tortured an American citizen, and the teeny, itsy-bitsy little fact that despite Trump's ridiculously bogus claims of creating 500,000 jobs with this defense deal alone, that would mean that this defense deal, by the way, created more jobs by itself overnight than the entire amount of employees currently working at Amazon. But, the fact that this deal created infinitely more jobs in Saudi Arabia than in the US, and in fact exported technical and manufacturing jobs to Saudi Arabia at a direct loss to US manufacturing jobs. There is that little detail that he left out, yes. I made an entire other documentary about this. Go watch it, you fucking haramis. This guy does 1,000,001 things worse and more illegal than this Ukraine shit every single day, and you focus on this minutiae. I mean, the guy is massacring American farmers at a pace that would make even Mao blush, and you focus on total bullshit instead. Unfucking believable. Oh, and it's not just farmers. Trump's inauguration has coincided with a tsunami of suicide all across America. You don't actually need to impeach him. He's not doing a very good job. We have elections for that. Did we forget those exist? contests or merely forget how to win them. There was no significant change in the median U.S. household's disposable income between 2017 and 2018. Real median weekly earnings are just 2.6% above their level when Trump took office, and these increases have not offset long periods of wage stagnation. The median wage of a full-time male worker is still more than 3% below what it was 40 years ago. The Federal Reserve under Trump has spent about $400 billion in taxpayer dollars to bail out the repo market, essentially just QE by another name, bailing out the biggest banks on Wall Street from the ramifications of their own bad bets. Isn't that a bit more important than whether or not the Ukraine did or didn't investigate Hunter Biden? Every president more or less actually constantly does illegal shit and never gets called out on it. That's one of the perks of the job. The idea that after decades of watching president after president use hundreds of millions, if not billions, of your taxpayer dollars to overthrow democratically elected governments, kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people, donate fully kitted out torture centers to dictatorial regimes, build torture centers in countries that don't want them there, and just straight up kill and torture innocent people, a temporary hold on aid to the Ukraine is the one thing that rouses you to your feet to call for impeachment and accountability? Suddenly? Just like that? I mean, seriously, it's a joke. A temporary hold on aid to the Ukraine is the one thing you simply can't stand for. Donald Trump has literally single-handedly helped to facilitate a famine in Yemen. Arms he's given to the Saudi regime have been handed over directly to fucking ISIS and Al-Qaeda. He is obliterating civilians in Afghanistan at a record fucking pace. But a temporary fucking hold on aid to the Ukraine, that's where you draw the line. We are bombing and torturing and spying on and murdering civilians daily on a global basis, but the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back is a temporary hold on aid to the fucking Ukraine. America is beyond satire at this point. I literally can't even do it anymore. I cannot. The least accountable nation on the face of the earth, squabbling internally about accountability via impeachment. Wow, that's a real of irony right there. We are hacking away at the branch of the problem. And why is that? Because when it comes to accountability, to really hold presidents accountable for their crimes would require both self-reflection and an openness to criticize those we've anointed as our political saviors. It would require us reflecting on the myth we have of America in our own minds. And neither of those are really options. So finally, in closing, I would leave you with the remarkably prescient words of the only man to ever truly stand upon that fateful precipice of impeachment and be forced to publicly reconcile with the shame and disgrace that would bring upon him and his legacy for all time. Richard Milhouse Nixon. Thank you and good night. Subscribe, I guess. I think I'm supposed to say that now.
Others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.